Senator Wiener, welcome, and you're ready to begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and your staff for working diligently with us on this bill. And I want to note from the outset the committee did mention some technical amendments in the analysis, not the policy amendments, but the technical amendments, and we're happy to accept those technical amendments. Colleagues, Senate Bill 201 is a long overdue piece of legislation to ensure that people who are born intersex are able to make their own decisions about their own health and their own gender identity and their own bodies, rather than having permanent, irreversible, medically unnecessary surgeries performed on them without them having even the slightest ability to have any input onto whether to have those permanent, irreversible, medically unnecessary surgeries. Surgeries that may assign them a gender that is not their actual gender, and surgeries that may have permanent negative consequences for their life. To be clear, SB 201 is not about removing parents or physicians from the decision on whether or not to have surgery. What it is about is ensuring that the person whose body is being operated on is actually a part of that decision. Because a baby, by definition, cannot be part of that decision. Right now, the only person who isn't involved is the person whose body is being permanently changed. The person whose genitals will be permanently and irreversibly changed, and the person who may be permanently sterilized, may permanently lose sexual sensation, or may have permanent incontinence problems. That person should have participation and a say in their future. All we're asking, colleagues, is that the person who's being operated on be able to weigh in. It's that simple. And to be clear, we are talking about medically unnecessary surgeries, surgeries that can be safely deferred. The bill is very clear that if the surgery is medically necessary, for example, if a child cannot urinate, then the surgery, of course, may and should be performed on that baby. Since the 1950s, and it wasn't always this way, since the 1950s, medical practice in many cases has been to perform potentially dangerous sex assignment and quote-unquote normalization surgery on the sex characteristics of intersex babies in order to make them appear quote-unquote normal. There is no compelling evidence to suggest that these very personal decisions need to be made by doctors and parents so early in life, and there is a great deal of research indicating that such procedures can have devastating lifelong consequences. We are currently allowing doctors and parents to make these decisions, and we want the children to be involved. I want to be also very clear. We are lucky to have some of the best doctors in the world here in California. I am particularly proud of UCSF in my district. This is not about an attack on the medical profession. Physicians save lives every single day in our community. I'm a big supporter of the medical profession, and I have on many cases, in many situations, been an ally to the California Medical Association, including on some very, very difficult issues. Yet doctors are not always right, and the medical profession is not always right. In fact, with the LGBT community and sexual minorities, there is a not so pretty history. Some physicians used to perform lobotomies on LGBT children to quote-unquote fix them and make them quote-unquote normal. Some physicians used to perform electric shock therapy on LGBT people to quote-unquote fix and normalize them. Physicians in California, some, used to perform conversion therapy on our LGBT children to fix quote-unquote and normalize them before we banned it. We've banned female genital mutilation and sterilization of minors for similar reasons. Overwhelmingly, we should defer to physicians' medical judgments about their patients, but not always. And there are rare and exceptional circumstances where medical practices can violate our fundamental values as a society, and we have a responsibility to take action. The medical profession, contrary to what has been expressed, is not unified here. And I think it's very important to understand that many physicians, 2 of them are with me here today, strongly disagree with the position that the California Medical Association and other associations have taken on this bill and on this issue. But it's not just rank and file physicians who hold this view in support of SB 201. Indeed, you all should have received a joint statement from 3 former U.S. Surgeons General, 1 appointed by George W. Bush, 2 appointed by Bill Clinton, categorically rejecting these surgeries. Quote, when an individual is born, and I'm reading from the statement, when an individual is born with atypical genitalia that pose no physical risk, treatment should focus not on surgical intervention, but on psychosocial and educational support. Quote, cosmetic genitoplasty should be deferred until children are old enough to voice their own view about whether to undergo the surgery. Quote, those whose oath or conscience say do no harm should heed the simple fact that to date, research does not support the practice of cosmetic infant genitoplasty. These are 3 former Surgeons General. The United Nations report on torture states, quote, children who are born with atypical sex characteristics are often subject to irreversible sex assignment, involuntary sterilization, involuntary genital normalizing surgery performed without their informed consent or that of their parents in an attempt to, quote, fix their sex, leaving them with permanent, irreversible infertility and causing severe medical suffering. The U.S. State Department has made a similar statement. Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, groups that protect human rights in this world have taken the same position. Colleagues, I expressed to the opposition to this bill early on my desire to work with them, to take feedback from them, and to try to come up with a bill that we can move forward. They have steadfastly told me, no thank you, we're not interested in working with you or negotiating with you on this bill. We are simply categorically opposed. They have every right, of course, to take that position, and I'm not criticizing them for refusing to negotiate with us. But our role as legislators sometimes is to force those conversations. And by voting this bill out of committee today, that will force this long overdue conversation. So I ask you to allow that conversation to proceed after this very, very first committee hearing on this bill, rather than shutting it off today. So colleagues, I respectfully ask for an aye vote. With me today are Kimberly Zieselman, who is an intersex person and the executive director of Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth. Dr. Eileen Wong Gregorio, a urologist, a surgeon, and a board member of Interact. We're also joined by Dr. Scott Nass, who is a family physician from Palm Springs and the president-elect of GLMA, which was formerly called the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. And we're also joined by Tammy Martin from Equality, California. Thank you.
Very good, Senator Wiener. Thank you for your opening on the bill. Welcome to the witnesses. We have 6 minutes collectively. I hope you guys have organized yourself. And
we have.
Welcome to begin any way you want.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Zieselman, and I am a lawyer, a parent, and the executive director of Interact, Advocates for Intersex Youth. I'm also an intersex woman. When I was growing up, intersex traits were kept secret at all costs. I learned the truth about my body at age 41 after doctors lied to me and my family for decades. While admittedly some things have changed for kids like me, many things haven't. Bodies like mine have existed throughout history without any need for surgery. It was a fear of gay and transgender people that led to the first interventions on atypical genitalia. Women with large clitorises were a primary concern, for fear that they would pursue lesbian relationships. It's impossible to talk about where we are today without understanding this practice's historical roots in sexism and homophobia. Just as LGBT people fought against being classified as mental disorders, intersex people fight against being classified as physical disorders. I'm here on behalf of our young people who have attempted suicide when they learned their sexual dysfunction was caused by infant hypospadias surgery. I'm here on behalf of our youth who have lost sexual sensation to infant clitoral reductions, and our young people who wear diapers for incontinence because of infant vaginoplasties. Frankly, what hurts the most is not the physical pain, but the knowledge that we were robbed of our own most intimate choices. If opponents claim this is no longer happening, it's because their own definition of intersex is intentionally narrow. A recent Public Records Act request by Interact shows that over 4,000 such surgeries were reimbursed by Medi-Cal in the last 3 years, with procedures to relocate an already functional urethra and to create or alter a vaginal opening among the most common. While not everyone uses the term intersex, for myself and for many others, including the youth that I oversee, it has become a guiding light, a reclamation that our bodies are our own. The word has helped us heal from medical trauma and understand that we are not broken. Regardless of terminology, children with variations in their sex traits deserve to be centered in this irreversible decision about their own body. Thank you.
My name is Eileen Wong. I'm a Stanford-trained urologist, and I'm here because I truly believe that intersex care is one of the greatest ethical failures of modern medicine. California law already protects minors from the harms of conversion therapy, sterilization, and female genital mutilation, but modifications to normalize intersex anatomy are somehow still condoned despite similar risks. Data supporting these procedures is notoriously poor quality and centers parental perception and cosmetic outcomes, not patient experience and function. These procedures are all performed on the biased and unproven assumption that meeting social gender norms will justify intense medical risks for all patients. Many children have grown up with decreased sensation or no orgasmic function, and a majority of infant vaginoplasties required invasive follow-up surgeries. These feminizing procedures are most commonly done on patients with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, one of the most common causes of natural genital difference, yet data show that up to 1/8 of these patients do not identify as female. My duty as a physician is to do no harm to my patients. When the FDA issued a warning about a vaginal mesh product after only 5 to 10% of patients complained, I adjusted my practice. By comparison, dissatisfaction rates for some procedures SB201 covers are cited as 40 to 50%. If intersex surgery were a medical device, the FDA would never have approved it. Certainly there are some adults who are satisfied that these choices were made from them, but the risks are too high to guess which babies will be which. Many of the adults harmed by these interventions find it almost impossible to find doctors to care for them after they age out of pediatrics. And I have to say, in my experience, this is medical abandonment. While multidisciplinary treatment teams do exist, they are still rare and lack the most important decision maker, the patient. The only way to do no harm is to wait and let those who may want surgeries to personally weigh in what they're willing to tolerate. As many intersex and transgender children show us, genitalia and chromosomes cannot reliably indicate how a child will identify their gender or what surgeries they may or may not want. SB201, while still a work in progress regarding its scope, centers individual consent and preserves options for children, the patients we are treating. I am proud to support this bill and to have flown from Philadelphia, and I'm going to be taking a red-eye home tomorrow and operating the full day, because we don't need to change intersex bodies. We need to change our practice.
Thank you. Tammy Martin with Equality California, sponsor of SB 201, which at its core is about the state of California respecting an individual's autonomy over their own body, and in some cases, gender identity, which is fundamental to all the work that we do on LGBTQ rights. And it's important that we continue to exhibit California leadership, because the situation today is that medically unnecessary surgeries that cause long-lasting and permanent harm are being performed on children without their involvement or consent. which is a human rights violation. And that's why we stand with Senator Wiener in sponsoring this bill and urge the committee to support it as well.
Hello, I'm Scott Nass. I'm a family physician in Palm Springs, California, and I partner with gender diverse patients across the lifespan from youth to adults. And I'm here today in my role as president-elect of GLAMA, Health Professionals Advancing LGBTQ Equality, formerly known as the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. And I'm representing our members and other interested parties who support strong science-based policy, which we published a couple of years ago, advocating for deferred surgeries on intersex children, as well as the 82 individuals who signed our recent sign-on support letter for Senate Bill 201. I'm here to share that we do believe this is an LGBTQ issue. This is one we're happy to advocate on behalf of the individuals who've come forward as patients and asked us to be involved. And I'm here to, as a physician, center the voices of those with the lived experience, something that I can't possibly talk about myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Wiener and all your witnesses. In terms of trying to find balance and fairness, it went a little over, but we'll try to balance it out when the opposition comes up. I'd like to invite anyone who is also in support of this bill to come up to the microphone. And again, under our committee rules, we'd like to just ask that you give your name and an affiliation if you do have one. And your indication of position on the bill, and unfortunately, we don't have time for too much else. So welcome, and go ahead.
Becca Kramer Matter on behalf of the ACLU of California, proud sponsors of this bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, panel members. My name is Cynthia Johnson. I drove up from Carlsbad today. I'm an affected intersex person, and I'm an independent advocate associated with Interact, Advocates for Youth. I support the bill, and I thank you for your support of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, committee members. I'm a community member from Somos Familia Valle from the San Fernando Valley, showing strong support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Allergic Gray from San Francisco. I'm an independent artist and advocate and writer and strong support. And I'm also queer, which I think is relevant.
Hi, I'm Hans. I'm an intersex person. I also serve as communications director with Interact in support.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Pixie Pearl from the Sacramento LGBT Community Center, and I'm also an intersex adult living with negative effects from this non-consensual surgery, so I'm strong support of this bill.
Thank you.
George Rye on the board of the Sacramento LGBT Community Center.
Thank you.
Strong support.
My name is Madi Roby. I am a intersex person living in Sacramento, and I support this bill.
My name is Sid Abad. I'm a co-founder of Santa Barbara Transgender Advocacy Network, and I facilitate a trans youth support group every week, and I am in support of this bill.
Very good. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to come forward to indicate support for this legislation? All right, seeing none, we'll thank the witnesses at the table and invite those who are in opposition to come up. Hopefully they've organized themselves. All right, so I want to invite the witnesses in opposition to identify themselves. We did have a clock running, so it's about a little under 7 minutes for you collectively, and we welcome you, and please proceed.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Kelly Swords. I'm a pediatric urologist from Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego.
Adrienne Marks, I have congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and I had genital surgery at an early age, and also a member of the LGBT plus community.
Pediatric endocrinologist practicing at UC Davis, and I'm here in support of the bill as well.
I'll start. So good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just a little bit about my background. As a fellow, I helped create the Differences in Sexual Differentiation clinic. It's a multidisciplinary clinic at my institution. And now I practice at Rady, and we have a very similar multidisciplinary clinic. On behalf of myself, the urologic community, the California Medical Association, and specialists who treat these patients, we are in strong opposition to SB 201. So while my title might be pediatric urologist, I'm first and foremost a patient advocate every single day. This includes making individualized recommendations for each patient by educating families so they can act in their children's best interests. I firmly believe that healthcare is not one size fits all. Each person I interact with deserves unique care that's crafted specifically for them. SB 201 does just the opposite and treats every child the same, ignoring the impact of delayed treatment. It is important to say that I'm very grateful that we have lawmakers who are aiming to protect children. I'm united with you in this endeavor. SB 201, in its broad definition of intersex, that the medical community at large does not support, the unprecedented definition of informed consent that is unworkable, and the provisions that hinder a medical professional's ability to recommend care is alarming. The bill will result in children being exposed to more physical and emotional pain, and in the long run, likely result in an increased number of surgeries needed. For example, hypospadias is common. It occurs in approximately 1 in 250 boys. It is not an intersex condition. In simple terms, hypospadias is when the hole that a boy pees from is not on the tip of the penis, but lower on the shaft. CAH, also on the bill, is also not an intersex condition. These patients are genetically male and female and do not consider themselves intersex. Last month, I volunteered in Ghana to teach and perform hypospadias surgery. There are no pediatric urologists in West Africa. Therefore, children, families, and their doctors traveled from far to come and see us. Many had been waiting for years for their surgery. Most were much older than the average 6 to 12 months of age that we perform surgeries on in the United States. I got to see their increased pain, popped stitches with erections, and extreme discomfort with catheters firsthand. Despite this, these young men remained thankful that they would finally be able to have straight erections and pee standing up. And now I continue to keep in touch with the Ghanaian urologist. These older boys are healing more poorly than their younger counterparts, and a larger number will need a second surgery to fully correct their hypospadias surgery. SB 201 puts California boys at risk of these same complications. Treatment of DSD has changed and advanced significantly in the last 20 years. It is unfortunate that many of the supporters of this bill cite cases from 30+ years ago as justification to pass this bill. I sympathize deeply with these patients that were treated in this era. However, we now take a team care approach that provides families, resources, and choices. In many cases, surgery is not offered. Yet it is important to have options that SB 201 removes. I would like to make an important point. In 2016, the American Medical Association spent 1.5 years independently reviewing all of the data from both sides related to DSD treatment, and they established they could not support a moratorium on general surgery for patients with DSD. 2 years later, in 2018, 11 professional organizations that ranged from psychiatry, endocrinology, obstetrics and gynecology, urology, and health professionals advancing LGBT equality reviewed the data as well and joined in supporting the AMA's position. While I understand the senator's intent, withholding treatment options and treating children as if they are one size fits all will negatively affect these patients' physical and psychological health. Senate Bill 201 is the wrong approach, and we respectfully ask you to vote no. Thank you so much for your time and attention.
Thank you, Chairman Glazer and fellow committee members. My name is Adrienne Marks. I am a 27-year-old nurse practitioner from Napa, California, and I'm here today as a member of the LGBT+ community and as an individual who had genital surgery at a young age, speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 201. Within the first 24 hours of being born, I was transferred to intensive care. My parents soon learned I was born with a rare adrenal gland condition called congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. In those first few days, my body struggled to survive, and it was known my life would not be easy. Not only would I have to take medication 3 times a day for the rest of my life to live, I would also face the challenges of being born with genitalia that was not functional. Due to CAH, I was exposed to an excess amount of male hormones while in the womb. As a genetically born female, this caused my vaginal canal to fuse externally and connect with my urinary tract. I had genital surgery at the ages of 1 and 4 to open my vaginal canal and reposition my clitoris. To be clear, in no way was my clitoris chopped off or cut, and today I do have a healthy sex life. Surgery was not intended to make me heterosexual or change my gender. Instead, surgery reduced numerous urinary tract infections and prevented me from starting my period through a small urinary opening, which would have left me in pain and tremendous emotional distress. SB 201 is ambiguous in its language regarding medical necessity and age of consent. For example, if it was in place when I was born, the advice of my doctors would have been silenced. I would have been forced to start kindergarten knowing I would wet my pants at school because I could not control when trapped urine pooling in my vagina might come out. According to SB 201, my surgeries would have been deemed medically unnecessary because wetting myself uncontrollably is not disabling or causing severe pain. And it would not recognize my own personal trauma because this bill states psychological factors do not constitute medical necessity. I do want to acknowledge the stories of hardship and pain of the true intersex people. Everyone should hear their voice. Yet SB 201 was organized without hearing the voice of the CAH community. I have personally spoken to CAH women who had surgery early and some who had surgery late. Both sides told me they do not want this bill. I am not a surgery advocate, but I believe this bill is the wrong answer to a very complex matter. I believe bunching over 30 different conditions when they are all distinctly different and each person is unique is careless. For CAH, there may never be a perfect answer because it is a hard condition to live with. But I know Senate Bill 201 would have created additional hardships for me and my family. I know a bill that blocks access to health care assumes every person is the same and discredits mental health would have made my life worse. Please vote no on Senate Bill 201. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Thanks for sharing your story. We have exceeded the time that's been allotted. If there's a quick summary that you'd like to make of your testimony or your credentials, and members may have questions.
Sure. I think that's my main role anyway. I'm a pediatric endocrinologist at UC Davis, and I'd like to be here just to answer any questions you may have about the very complicated biology at play. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. All right. I'd like to offer the opportunity for witnesses in opposition to come up to the microphone and identify themselves and any organizational affiliation if they wish, and an indication of their position on the bill. So please come forward.
My name is Liz Marks. I'm sorry. I'm Adrian's mother, and I oppose.
Thank you.
I'm Peter Marks from Napa, California. I oppose this bill as a father of Adrian, who has a congenital adrenal hyperplasia, not an intersex condition. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you all for all of your time. My name's Nicole. I vote in District 11. I'm a San Franciscan, and I am also LGBTQ, Adrian's partner, and I'm also a doctoral candidate, clinical psych. So,
thank you for being here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chris. I'm a proud member of the transgender community, and I oppose SB 201. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, members. Matt Back, representing the Societies of Pediatric Urology in opposition, and also the Osteopathic Physicians and Surgeons of California in opposition.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Brandon Marchi with the California Medical Association. We are opposed to the bill and align our comments with Dr. Swartz. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Yang. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics and urology at UC Davis, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Akila. I am a member of the LGBT plus community and a board certified family nurse practitioner. I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Amy Lee. I am from Santa Barbara, California, District 19. And I, strongly oppose this bill because I do have a friend who has CAH, and I urge you guys to vote no on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Hello, Scott Sparks. I'm a pediatric urologist at Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, and as a member of the LGBT community, I also oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Eric Kurzrock. I'm a professor of urology and pediatrics at UC Davis Children's, and I oppose this bill.
Randall Hager, representing the California Psychiatric Association. We oppose this bill.
I'm Dr. Paul Kokorowski, pediatric urologist from the Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, and I oppose this bill.
Ryan Spencer on behalf of the American College of OBGYNs, District 9, in opposition.
Dr. Ezekiel Rodriguez, pediatric urologist, medical director, Valley Children's Hospital, Madera, California. I oppose this bill.
Jenna Whaley Cora, resident of Santa Cruz, California, parent of a child with salt-wasting CAH, and I oppose this bill.
Courtney Baker, resident of Sacramento County. I'm a mother of a daughter with simple virusing CAH, and I oppose this bill.
Min Chow, pediatric urology from Children's Hospital, Loma Linda. I oppose this bill.
Heidi Stephanie, representing University of California, Irvine and Children's Hospital of Orange County. I'm a pediatric urologist, and I oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Nancy Johnson, a resident of Fairfield, California, and I strongly oppose this bill.
Randy Olson, resident of Sacramento. I'm a proud grandfather of a granddaughter that has CAH, and I oppose this bill.
Tim Madden, representing California Society of Plastic Surgeons, in opposition.
My name is Eric Bogart. I'm from Los Angeles. I have CAH. It is not an intersex condition, and it's misleading to include it in this bill.
Hi, my name is Teresa Ellison. I'm here from Sacramento. My son just had hypospadia surgery. I just got the clean bill of health, so I'm here to oppose this bill.
Thank you.
Katie Layton on behalf of the Children's Specialty Care Coalition in opposition.
My name is Karen Bogard. I'm from Southern California. I have a child with CAH. I'm also the board chair of CARES Foundation. CARES Foundation strongly opposes, as do I. The organization works in conjunction with physicians and surgeons and has a petition that's only a week old, with 1,100 signatures opposing the bill.
Thank you very much. Are there any other witnesses in opposition? All right, seeing none, we'll bring the matter back to the committee. Let me just first thank all the witnesses who have come in favor and against to share their thoughts with us on a very, very difficult topic, as I think all of us who have looked into it have come to understand. I want to bring the issue back to my committee for any questions that they may have.
I have questions first.
Questions or comments, whatever you'd like to do.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I do want to recognize all the witnesses for being here today and telling their personal stories on both sides. I think that's very important to hear. I also would like to just take a little bit of exception with Senator Wiener's comments that all the opposition didn't want to negotiate or do anything. I've made it clear to the bill sponsor that I thought education was something, providing to the parents information from Equality California for every single patient that may have this condition, because I think education is knowledge, and particularly in the state of California, I think, as we've known, that people are more open every single day, and I think will do the right thing based on being educated. And while I do have great respect for Senator Wiener and also Equality California, I'll continue to listen as I'm sitting here today. But taking a situation where I have 9 grandkids, and I just can't understand why we'd have a situation where we would take away the ability of 2 adults that are open-minded to be educated and say, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do what you think is the best in consultation with your doctor, what's best for your son or daughter, because the state of California said so. I'm just very, very conflicted by that whole thing. Yet, I do see that there are some situations where something is necessary to do here. I just don't think we've found the sweet spot, and I would like to work with the author, if this doesn't go through today, to try to find what that sweet spot is.
Thank you, Senator Dodd. Senator Pan.
Thank you so very much. First of all, I want to thank Senator Wiener for his work in this area. And I think we've had a chance to talk, and I was pleased to support the resolution. I do have significant concerns about this bill, because basically we are saying with this bill, and I think it's been raised. There's also some, I guess, areas would need significant clarification as well, but that basically a physician's license would be in jeopardy for working with the parents and basically trying to figure out what's the best, the standard, basically trying to find the best standard of care. And I think, and actually, I agree that to as much as possible, where trying to engage the child, all right, is ideal, and that when possible, we should try to do that. So I think the goals that you're trying to, you and the sponsors are trying to achieve, I support. But I feel that this bill, the mechanism, is unfortunately one that I think has very significant consequences. And I would just, maybe I had a few questions to clarify. I know we had some conversations about this bill. So, we've heard from the, one of the opposition are actually parents and families of children with congenital adrenal hyperplasia. This bill specifically calls out patients with that condition. Have you had, what's your conversations with the community since their association is opposed in terms of trying to address their concerns?
Yeah, when you say association, I'm not sure if you're talking about the CARES Foundation. That foundation has a pretty significant history of homophobia. So I don't know, while I'm very respectful of individuals who have opinions on this, that's different than in terms of an association. Just to be really clear, none of us is saying that every person who undergoes this surgery, whether it's from CAH or other situations, that everyone is dissatisfied. Clearly, there are people who are glad that they had the surgery. But the question is about the people who aren't, who either were assigned the wrong gender or have permanent problems as a result of the surgery. And even if, and there are some disputes about the data, but even if we assume that a majority of people are satisfied, does that justify such profoundly negative impacts for the people who were assigned the wrong gender or who have permanent problems? And is there, in terms of the harm of waiting until a child can express for themselves, giving informed consent, which a young child can provide, and we adopt existing California law in terms of informed consent, you balance the harms. This is not, no one's saying that this is all completely clean cut in one direction. But the question is, who's being harmed?
So can I clarify, because you said informed consent, yes. We do allow teenagers who are emancipated minors or around reproductive health, but not younger than that. While they can give, certainly, as a pediatrician, I certainly ask their opinions, but they don't have any legal standing to provide consent. So we're talking about delaying surgery until age 14?
No, we're not.
So how would that operationalize? Because this is a law now. So this is not just, I'm talking patient and said, well, what do you think? And you're 8 years old. I mean, this is law. So we're going to be allowing.
We're going to be ensuring that the child can actually participate in the decision.
So developmentally, we're talking then about.
I think young children are, as we see more and more, are very much able to express particularly what their gender is and what they want. And so we're not talking about waiting until kids are a teenager or 18 years old, but we know that a baby can't say anything. And that's what we're trying to move away from. I will also just say, Senator, and I appreciate the question, that if we had anyone to negotiate with on this, and respectfully to Senator Dodd, we've had, in terms of the opposition to the bill, no, not about you. I'm talking about the opposition. I'm talking about the medical associations. And if my phrasing was vague, I apologize for that. I'm talking about the medical associations. The medical establishment has made clear they don't want to work with us. So for medical necessity or informed consent, these various, we get criticized for saying it's not precise enough or it's wrong. and not offering an alternative or saying this is how it should be. Because some have suggested, including members of the legislature, maybe there should be a specific age where the surgery can be performed because the child is able to express. And we've made clear that we're open to those discussions, but then we're never able to actually have that negotiation in terms of the opposition to the bill.
Okay. Well, I think it, well, I'm sure we'll also discuss in judiciary. I think it's a bit problematic to say that let's say a 6-year-old or an 8-year-old, that they're, and I think this bill requires a signature and some other things, that given their developmental staging, that would hold up necessarily in court or the Medical Board of California. But perhaps I have a question for neurologists, and I think we had an endocrinologist here. Can you speak to well, what are the trade-offs for waiting till someone's a teenager?
With most of these surgeries is more pain for the patients, a higher rate of complication, a higher rate of infection. When kids go through puberty, things get sweaty down there, and there's definitely a higher rate of infection in all that we do. There's then a higher likelihood that they'll need a second surgery. Kids in hypospadias, they have a higher rate of the hole in the tip of the penis becoming too small.
So actually, just to clarify, though, I mean, we're talking about several different types
Oh, yeah.
of conditions.
So, but all of
So,
these,
right.
increased infection, increased bleeding, increased pain. Babies often don't need narcotics after surgery. We have an opioid crisis in this country. Early exposure to narcotics lends itself to more drug use. Teenagers do need narcotics after these surgeries. And poor outcomes, repeat surgery across the board.
Okay, and then the endocrinologist, I mean, you're not a surgeon, so why are the endocrinologists opposed? Because I've heard from several pediatric endocrinologists expressing their concerns.
The problem in my mind is that this is an extremely complicated, there's extremely complicated biology. So there are many, many molecular, hormonal, genetic problems that can lead to genital differences, and I don't think we can treat them all the same. That's my main opposition. We spend a great deal of time trying to understand the diagnosis and from working there in terms of an individualized management plan that sometimes, not often, but sometimes involves surgery. And so I don't like that we're treating everything the same.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may Dr. Wong also respond to that?
Of course, sure.
I find it a bit spurious for my colleagues to remark on how adult surgeries are more challenging because there is documented literature on how in certain hands hypospadias repairs have the same results in adults and children. I have a paper from Warren Snodgrass here from several years ago which says exactly that, despite popular opinion, that is the case. And we also have to point out that pediatric urologists are not the only people who operate on genitalia. That there is a growing coalition of surgeons who are able to do teenage and adult transgender surgery. And these patients are able to choose their own bodies and who go through surgeries, no surgeries without complication. We all know that. But that's true also of infant surgeries where there are, I've heard stories of people who've had vaginoplasties and who've had their parents had to dilate them weekly until they were 13. And if we're talking about psychological trauma and pain, I don't know how you can ignore those stories as well.
Okay, but to clarify, we heard, yes, do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you for acknowledging me. Just first off, with all due respect to Senator Wiener, the CARES Foundation is not homophobic. I know those people. I would go to the bats for them, so I just want to clarify that. Thanks. And then the second part, in terms the notion, as I said in my statement, that it's not that I'm for or against surgery. It's the fact that this is such a complex matter that either way, it's a tough call. Either way, unfortunately, no one's going to have the exact perfect outcome. But assuming everyone's the same and neglecting the mental health impacts of possibly delaying surgery, at least all I can speak for is CAH. But I've spoken to CAH individuals who have said that waiting till 18 or 19 was the worst thing they could ever imagine and something they would not wish on their worst enemy. So the fact that like I said, it's not that I don't want to sidestep all the people that have been hurt, but I think this is the wrong answer to a very, very complex matter.
I agree with Adrian.
Senator Kennedy, are you finished?
Okay. Well, I guess one last for the pediatric urologist, because as I said, I supported the resolution, and I think we should try to delay surgery when if we're able to, that when it's reasonable. It's a complex decision, and I think that's what we're hearing. And I think the challenge here is we're trying to legislate practice of medicine, and that always, and even with the best intentions, that often doesn't, people get caught up in that. Can you perhaps speak to where is the pediatric urology community in terms of the issues that are the broader issues that are raised by Senator Wiener and the intersex community? I mean, I think they do have a point in terms of where we want to try to get to. I have concerns about legislating it, but perhaps can you speak to that?
I also have concerns about legislating medicine. Things have changed so much. Even when in the last 5 to 10 years, almost every major center has a multidisciplinary clinic. Really, the numbers we're talking about, true DSD patients, true intersex patients, is estimated between 3 and 5 kids in California a year. And admittedly, those very complex patients, it's a hard answer, and we don't have the right one. I can tell you that my colleagues and I, and where I trained for fellowship, and even where I came from for residency, surgery is not the immediate answer. We don't want to burn bridges. We don't want to do things to kids that can't be reversed. The surgeries that we've talked about largely today are for normal function, better outcomes medically, like reduced urinary tract infections, and we do those things not to normalize a child. We do those things to help them function. And so when you're talking about those true DSD cases, which I think are also, it's estimated 100 surgeries in the entire United States a year, those are difficult. And I think everyone's going to admit that. But I think the thing is, we trust your medical providers, trust your state board licensing people, that in these multidisciplinary clinics, we're going to work together and we're going to find the best answer. Every single physician that I know, the question I always ask everybody is, what did you come to the hospital today to do? I go to the hospital every day to help my patients and to be perfect and to take the best care possible. And in a children's hospital, I would say that you're going to have that unanimous answer everywhere. I mean, pediatric people, we go into it because we love kids, we love humanity, and we're going to help them. And putting a bill like this that ties our arms and we can't even give all the options, like I said before, it's really alarming, because people deserve education. I 100% agree with you, Senator Dodd, like teach one, reach many. We should be educating all of these people, everyone, about DSD, about intersex, and that's how we become more accepting. That's how we get further. That's how we arrive at better decisions, and that's how we take better care of all humans. It's a different game than it was before.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah. Senator Hill?
I think Senator Galgiani had her microphone up first.
No, not me.
No.
Add me to the list, please.
Senator Galgiani?
I want to thank the author for authoring the bill, and I've co-sponsored it with you. And admittedly, I knew very little, if actually close to nothing, about this issue until you brought the bill forward. But as someone from the LGBT community and someone who was born with scoliosis, a curve in my spine, I know I'm sensitive to things that happen at birth, and I was going to ask the question originally, but I think you've sort of answered it. But it seemed to me that most of us know that as young children, we have our tonsils taken out. because it reduces infections when we're older, but that's not done at birth. It's done when children are older, 5, 6, 7, I suppose. Maybe you can once again speak to why that's something that's so commonly done, and it's okay that that's done later in life, but how it's so different with these types of surgeries.
Respectfully, I'm going to try to stay in my lane. I'm not an ear, nose, and throat surgeon, but I am someone who almost had a tonsillectomy as a young child. That's usually done for infection, for snoring, for sleep apnea. So that's a different ball game. And it's amazing that you mentioned that, because the most recent decisional regret paper actually talked to parents about decisional regret after tonsillectomy, and it was 41 to 49% of parents had decisional regret after tonsillectomy, which if you look at the papers for the CH regret, you'll see anywhere from 20% to 40%, which is actually lower than parents regretting tonsillectomy. So there's that. But I think that the question of medical necessity, again, it's very sticky and it's very hard to define. And I don't know that it's possible as a legislative body to define that in a way that we don't harm some children.
And there are definitions of medical necessity. This isn't some sort of vague, ambiguous thing. And we've heard comments about a person struggles to urinate, or having physical pain, or having urine that's pooling and trapped in your vagina. That's not what we're talking about here. That I think under any reasonable definition would be medical necessity. And as I said at the beginning, if the medical profession that's opposing this bill, I shouldn't say the medical associations that are opposing the bill, have a concern they want to see a change in the definition of medical necessity, the way that typically works in the legislature is they come forward and say, we don't like your definition, here's an alternative definition. Because obviously if someone is in pain, if someone has urine pooling in their vagina and can't urinate, or might urinate when they don't want to urinate, if someone is really having those medical problems, that is medically necessary. That's not what we're talking about here. And I think 20 to 40% regret is actually quite significant in my book for an irreversible surgery. And I don't know if I heard incorrectly about, quote, true intersex patients being 3 to 5 per year. That's not accurate. It's not even close to accurate.
I have one more question.
Senator Galgiani.
It seems like most of the dispute is around what the definition of medical necessity is, and perhaps you would consider, in addition to the bill, not instead of, but in addition to having an advisory task force of some sort that would make recommendations to the medical board for what medically necessary in these instances.
We would be open to that conversation, absolutely. I think Dr. Wong had something to add.
I'm going to, unless that needs to be responsive to Senator Galgiani, I want to keep moving through the panel. So,
with her statement about tonsillectomy, and specifically the data you suggested on decisional regret. And I would like to point out that the data supposedly that they have done on decisional regret in people with CAH was something that was actually supported by the CARES Foundation, number one, which leads it to implicit bias. And number two, that the study that she's referring to from the University of Indiana by Dr. Konrad Zizmansky was actually a retrospective review of patients with CAH from their clinic who responded to an online survey. This is compared to tonsillectomy data that was done at a prospective control trial where patients were given the option to have surgery and or not. It is not something that can be compared directly. And I wanted to bring this up because it's an example, I think, of what is one of the most rampant, most disappointing things to me as being a urologist, as a scientist, and a mother being involved in this field, is the relative intellectual dishonesty of some of my colleagues in the way that they present data and interpret data.
okay. Senator Galgiani, anything else? No. All right. I have Senator Hill and Senator Leyva.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Wiener, for your leadership in this. And I certainly recall the issue of last year, and as it came forward in the resolution, and certainly supported it. And Doctor, I appreciate your comments that as you go to work every morning, you're there to help your patients, and that's a wonderful thing. And I think just in this room and sitting up here, every one of us, I think, feels the same way when we come to work and sit in this room. And in that other room that's behind us. It's very important for that. And I also want to thank Ms. Marks. Thank you very much for your story, your history, and for sharing that today. It was very meaningful and powerful. And also, as I look through the analysis that the very capable staff put together, the same questions that I think we've heard today are raised in here, and some of the same questions that we heard from the opposition about defining, medically necessary, and how we would do that, and how you would, the terminology of medical necessity is too limiting, and the clinical judgment, and how we would come to that. And what's probably most troubling is these are definitional issues that we're trying to create and craft. And then as I look at the letter from the California Medical Association, it's troubling when I hear that they have not been willing, or anyone has been willing, to sit down and negotiate perhaps the clarification or the definitions that we're looking at, because I think that's where there's room here to come to some agreement on that. And what's troubling, too, is I read, it says on behalf of this is the letter from the CMA, on behalf of the more than 44,000 members of the California Medical Association. Well, I think there are 175,000 licensed physicians in California, so they represent a small portion of that number. Is there a group somewhere that can sit down and negotiate and look for something, working with the chair of this committee and the committee, that can craft those definitions? I think it's irresponsible to walk away from that, especially in light of the fact of what the resolution called for last year and the support that I think we have for some future of some compromise in this. And I think the definitions, as Ms. Marks was talking about, I mean, there's some things that apply and some things that shouldn't apply. And I'm going to support the bill today, because I think I want to make sure that it does move so that we can get those questions, those definitions answered and solved in some form before it gets to the floor and however it moves forward. So I appreciate this conversation and discussion, but it's unfortunate that we can't sit down with the profession that is responsible for many of these decisions and get to that place.
And Senator, if I may just clarify one thing, Ms. Marks actually has been willing to talk to some of our folks, and so I don't want to say that no one, but in terms of the medical associations, that's what I mean.
No, I know
Ms. Marks has been very gracious with her time.
Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that. My concern was that those who we look towards to be part of that conversation, and if they have not, that's troubling.
Representative Pediatric Urologist, we have met with the sponsors of the bill as well. We have had conversations with staff. We had 2 months of trying to get CAH exempted from a simple resolution last year that the author wouldn't take in that resolution. So we have had conversations. I just want to be clear that this is not that we have never had conversations. It has come up. It's a complicated issue. Fundamentally, though, we do have differences. They want to legislate the practice of medicine and consider things like hypospadias and CAH as intersex. The reality is we fundamentally don't agree with that. They want to allow, they don't want to have parents involved in a decision. We fundamentally disagree with that. The definitions of medical necessity, we fundamentally disagree with those. So Senator Hill, I think a lot about you, and we've worked a lot together. There are times when you have to agree to disagree.
Okay.
And this is one of those issues.
Okay. I'm going to go to Senator Leyva, but before I do that, I want to at least respond to the thoughtful comments from my colleague, Senator Hill. I agree with much of what you have said, and I think it's a point of frustration for me, and I think for the committee staff and others, is that there seems to be room to find some common ground here. And yeah, all the partners have not been willing to put things on the table and try to carve out definitions more concisely. It's part of why I think this bill is not ready at the moment. But I have cautious optimism that if we can keep working on it, that we can try to find that space, because of the common goals we all have for the health of our kids. So it is a point of frustration, even though I have some, as you know, reluctance about moving the bill ahead today. Senator Leyva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you to both sides for being here. This is what democracy looks like. This is a hard subject. This is difficult. I read this book, in preparation for today, and I read all of the opposition letters, and I read from the 3 surgeon generals so that I could try and help make an informed decision. I too love my job, and I too every day go to work hoping I can change the lives for the betterment of folks in California. So according to the Human Rights book, around 1 in 2,000 babies is different enough that doctors may recommend surgical intervention. So 1 in 2,000, that's a lot of babies. I think it's a difficult subject, but Senator Wiener, are you saying that if it's medically unnecessary, that's when the surgery should not happen on a child? Is that what your bill is saying?
Correct. On a baby. Correct.
On a baby,
Yes.
exactly. But so, and then my question for the medical group would be, if it's not medically necessary at the time the child is born, why is waiting a problem?
Just to refer to my previous comments, I think the children experience more pain, more complications, and then their need for surgery, the second surgery increases as they get older. In my own experience and in a lot of our literature, the Hensley paper, I know that you know that one, Dr. Wong, and even in my most recent experience in Ghana, we operated on kids that were the 6 to 12 months of age. We operated on kids up to 20. And the kids who were teenagers, older, even the 3 and 4-year-olds had a higher rate of complication. And although anecdotal, I think that the Hensley paper showed that, demonstrated that. There was another paper, I think, from Canada that demonstrated that. And so we know that it's harder for the children to delay surgery.
In response to her remark to me, I am aware of that paper, and that's a paper from 2001 using techniques that are somewhat outdated. And what's interesting is that I think there are a total of 35 patients in that study, and overall there was a higher rate of reoperation, except if when you look at the subgroup analysis, only 8 of those patients were actually de novo hypospadias. In other words, only 8 had never had previous surgery. So of those 8 people, there was a 100% success rate after 2 surgeries, whereas the remaining patients who had had previous infant surgeries, yes, they had higher complication rates. So I just wanted to point out again that interpretation of medical data can be very biased based on people's own opinions.
Thank you. And I did want to say also that we heard, I can't remember who said it, but someone was talking about referring to studies 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Everything in here happened within the last 3 to 4 years. And when they, one mother talked about, I think this is about education. I'm not a doctor, but I have children. I never thought 27 years ago when our twins were born that we could have an intersex child. I wish someone had said that. We didn't, but what if we did? And we had no knowledge, we had no understanding of what we should or shouldn't do for this child. So I think education is extremely important, and talking to parents when they are about to have a child, that your child could be born like this, or when your child is born like this, the first thing you say is congratulations, you have a healthy child who looks a little different than some other children do. But we're gonna work on that together. My worry is that we're supposed to get better as a society, and when I read some of these stories about children and what we've put them through, and they haven't had any opportunity, I think CAH is a little different. I'd like to see us, I think what I'm hearing you saying is you're open to working on things. I worry that if you had not had that surgery earlier, then what we're trying to prevent could have happened to you. You can't go to kindergarten and be wetting your pants. All your peers would think there was something wrong with you, and we wouldn't want that. So I hope that we can look at that aspect. But, in reading this study, one mother said she had an intersex child, and she just said, someone asked why her son looked different. That's just the way he was born, and he looks different down there. And why do we, as a society, want to make sure everyone conforms? When you're born the way you are. So I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but I also just think as a society, we're supposed to get better. When you talked about conversion therapy, I'm so glad that I was here to get to be a part of banning that. As a mother of a gay child, if my daughter had been born 20 years ago, she probably would have been told there was something wrong with her, which of course there's nothing wrong with her. She's getting married in the fall to a woman. She's as happy as she can be. She's a successful woman. But I worry that we are doing these surgeries unnecessarily on these children, and they don't have any say, exactly what the author has said. So all of that to say, I want to see I will vote for the bill today. I want to see it move out. I hope there's some work we can do. I hope that that CMA and AMA will come to the table, because I understand there are sometimes fundamental disagreements, but this affects a lot of people and a lot of people's lives. So thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you for letting us have this discussion today.
Great. Any other comments from committee members? Senator Wiener, before I have you close, I would like to ask for a 5-minute recess. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay, thank you for the opportunity for that recess. Before I bring it back to Senator Wiener to close, I want to see if there's any other further comments from the dais. Senator Galgiani.
You know, I brought up earlier about whether the author might consider putting together an advisory board to make recommendations on with the procedures involved in this space, how they're different from the definition of medically necessary in statute or wherever that is. I think this challenge that my colleagues are having is that we don't know enough about what is medically necessary, what's not. Certainly Senator Pan has much broader knowledge than most of us on this committee here, but I feel that we're very close, just as Senator Hill said, and you were willing to consider putting together an advisory board in this capacity to advise on this. So I'm hoping and would like to ask you if you would take an amendment to the bill to create this advisory board so that we have professionals coming up with those decisions.
The answer is yes, Senator. I appreciate that. And we also, of course, stand ready to work with the medical associations on any suggestions they have about defining medical necessity if they have concerns about the existing definition. But the answer is yes.
Thank you.
So I guess my response to that, Senator, that constructive suggestion, Senator Galgiani, is to say thank you. I think we're all trying to find this space, this common ground space. And I think if it means that we take another week and work through your thoughts with the author and with the committee staff, we can see whether we have something that might be in the right form for us to consider next week on this issue. And if that is the direction in which you're heading, I think it's one that I can support and would encourage. All right. All right. Well, without further ado then, unless there's any final comments, Senator Pan.
So I think one of the concerns is that basically in the bill it says doing this is unprofessional conduct, which means you're threatening the license of a physician, and it refers to treatment, so it's fairly broad. So it also means that I mean, it's not clear. I mean, some of it you can say medical necessity, but some of it also I think raises some challenges for physicians to know, at what point their license might be threatened. Would you be willing to remove the section on unprofessional conduct?
We are absolutely open to a conversation about consequences and what the enforcement mechanism is, and making sure that there is an incentive for people to actually follow the law. So we're happy to have that general conversation to see if we can come to a resolution on it. And what that ultimate resolution would be, I can't say. But as I say, it takes two to tango. And we again invite the medical associations to actually work with us on these issues.
So just to clarify, you would be open to removing the section on unprofessional conduct?
I am open to a discussion about what the enforcement mechanism is and what the consequences would be for violating the law. I can't say here today that will be removing this, but we're open to that conversation. I'm not ruling anything out. We welcome that conversation because I understand that is a concern. I hear that. I've heard that before, and I hear it again today, and I understand and hear what you're saying, Senator, but we're open to that conversation. I can't say what the final result will be because that will be as a result of dialogue and negotiation and work collaboratively, which has not happened today on this legislation. And Mr. Back was right. Last year on the resolution, CMA did work with us, and we appreciated that. But this year, it's been a very, very different approach. And again, anyone has a right to categorically oppose anything they want. This isn't a criticism or saying that it's somehow unprofessional to do that. But that's the approach that they've taken, and it has hindered our ability to have these kinds of discussions.
I would just say that I think that's a fundamental issue to be addressed. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Senator Pan. So, Senator Wiener, I'm going to take the discretion of the chair to say thank you to my colleagues, thank you to your witnesses, both in favor and against, the doctors who have traveled here from far and wide, those who have had these experiences to share with us their stories. I thought it was a very in-depth and thoughtful hearing on a very sensitive subject in which I think all of us share the same goal, which is patient care and doing the right thing for folks in whatever condition in life that they are here. And so with that, I want to say thank you. We're going to defer this issue, at least for another week. We'll go and work together and see if we can find a pathway that incorporates some of the concerns and ideas that Senator Galgiani and others have raised.
Just for clarification, so the court is saying that the committee will not be voting today?
That would not be the direction that we're heading right now, yes.
Okay, so it's being taken off.
We're going to defer this, and we'll see if we can get the issue in shape for another hearing and consideration next week.
Okay, so it would then be agendized for next week, next Monday?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I believe that that's the last date that this committee could hear because it is double referred.
Under our without rule waivers, I think that you are correct.
Okay. While I am not in agreement with that decision, I respect the chair's prerogative to do that, and we will work in earnest and in good faith with the chair and with any stakeholder that wants to participate.
Very good. Thank you again. Thank you, Senator Wiener.
Chairman.
Thank you, everyone.
Mr. Chair, I just have a question. So does that mean when we reconvene on Monday of next week, we will just be here for a vote only?
Well, I'm going to see whether there's an amendment that can be crafted that takes into account the thoughtful feedback that we've gotten here today. And depending on the condition of that potential amendment, it would be set for a hearing with the bill as amended or as a vote only on the measure that's before us.
I just worry about all the witnesses on both sides that traveled to be here today and would have to try and be back next Monday. That's all.
I encourage them to stay in touch with the author or the committee staff, and we'll do our best to keep them informed about how things are going.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay.